Okay. So it's wonderful to be here this evening. Wonderful to have John Seed here tonight. It's wonderful to have graduating students from the certificate and the diploma of ecotherapy. It is really wonderful to feel the journey you've been on and the hard work and the commitment and the persistence and the unlearning that you've done. I'm going to acknowledge the unlearning that you've done, actually, the decolonising of your learning and the unlearning, and I'm sure some of you will be resonating with that. I would love to acknowledge the Darug country that I'm on, Darug lands, their care and custodianship for many, many centuries, the sacred places, the ancestors that I feel sometimes on this land watching. I want to acknowledge Dirubin, the river that borders the Darug country. I would like to acknowledge the black cockatoos and the wombats that I believe are totems of Darug country. I would like to acknowledge the elders that are past and present and emerging, and the continuing custodianship happens on Darug country. So really happy to do that tonight. A really warm welcome to John. I'm sure John will acknowledge the country he's on too, and we'll hear from John in just a minute. I'd just like to just acknowledge the online space that we're in across the Tasman. We've got kia ora, Aotearoa, if you can hear me. I know we've got Tui and Sabine. Wonderful to have Aotearoa on, and all states, lots of states in Australia, some I don't know. It's really wonderful to have you. So, and I'm just going to invite you to just look closely at some of the faces that you can see on the online space, and just acknowledge that we do have our head in the camera often, but we are whole bodies here tonight. So just wiggle your toes and wiggle your fingers and remember that you're a whole body, just because you're in front of the camera and we can really see. Yeah, great. Enjoy the wiggly. Enjoy that. And just acknowledge our bodies, our whole bodies that are here with us, as well as our minds, and enjoying remembering that tonight. And just acknowledging the different time zones we're in, and also the parental duties that some of us, and caring duties that some of us may or may not be doing, and juggling in with that. It's just always something that I like to think about on Zoom. I'd like to welcome people of all genders. I'd like to welcome people of Aboriginal descent, Asian descent, Arab descent, European descent, those who identify as Indigenous to this land, people of mixed and multiple descents. I'd love to welcome gay, lesbian, bisexual, heterosexual, pansexual, queer, and others who identify that I've missed the labels for. I'd love to acknowledge people and welcome people with disabilities, both visible and invisible. I'd love to welcome all the languages spoken here. Some I know, some I don't, but I honour the different languages that people speak and the traditions and culture that is embedded in those languages. I would like to welcome any survivors of abuse. I would like to welcome people who identify as activists and those who don't. I would like to welcome single, married, partnered, dating, monogamous and polyamorous relations. I would like to welcome any young people here, or children or younger people, and also older people. Into their 90s, 80s, 70s, whatever. You're very welcome. I'd like to welcome your emotions here. The joy, the celebration, the grief, the disappointment, the contentment, and any other emotions. If you want to just check in for a moment with that, they're all welcome here. Those who support you to be here, just take a moment to acknowledge them. Those who've supported you, graduates on your journey, on your learning and your unlearning journey. I'd like to welcome those who are dear to us that may have passed on. I'd like to acknowledge and welcome any elders in the room, any wisdom of any wisdom traditions, and acknowledge them and thank them sharing your knowledge. So I hope all of you feels welcome tonight. Everybody and everyone and all of you, the whole of you feels welcome. So just remember, we are hands and fingers and toes and whole bodies, not just faces on a screen. So thank you for that. Okay, so do we have Kate Cohen in here? Kate, are you here? Hey, Emily from the Northern Territory, woohoo. Okay, we don't have Kate yet. She might be running late. So John, if it's okay, I'd like to give you a really, really warm welcome and also welcome those who are coming into our celebration tonight from John's sort of network and community. Really, really happy to have you, John. I have greatest respect for the long, long years of your work and the spirit of your work that sort of stays with me, even though I'm not across everything that you do and probably never will be. The spirit of what you do stays with me, and the for the earth that you put on your emails, for the earth, I know it's for the earth, John. So I'd love to welcome you, and really happy to listen to what you have to say tonight in this space. If the rest of us can put ourselves on mute, would be really good.
Well, thanks so much for the invitation, Karen. I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited to know that there are people that are interested in ecotherapy, that are studying ecotherapy. It's been something that's been on my mind for a long time. And so perhaps I'll just tell you a little bit about the strange road that I've travelled that brings me here to be looking at all of you on this screen tonight. So in 1979, I had been living on Bodie Farm in northern New South Wales, a community that we'd started 5 years earlier, Buddhist meditators. We built a meditation centre and found some land nearby and were caretaking the meditation centre, organising meditation retreats, meditating ourselves, and growing our own food, building our own houses, delivering our own babies. And I thought I'd spend the rest of my life doing that, when mysteriously in 1979, in August, I somehow found myself on the line between the rainforest at the end of Terania Creek Road, the subtropical rainforest of northern New South Wales, and loggers and police, which a week before I couldn't have possibly imagined, but I'd gone to a market one Sunday, and one of my neighbours got up on the stage and called for help, saying that the loggers were coming in to log the rainforest at the end of Terania Creek Road the next day, and could we please help? And I didn't know there was a rainforest at the end of Terania Creek Road. I didn't know there was rainforest in Australia. I didn't know what rainforest was. I was just interested in getting enlightened. But somehow I was drawn to helping the neighbour and found myself at the end of Terania Creek Road on Monday morning. And then something happened to me there that I still haven't recovered from, and that is hard to describe, but I can only say that I heard the trees calling out to me, and it was so authentic and so compelling that my life just turned around. I won't say it was that day, but you know, over a very short period of time, I'd lost interest in everything that I'd been doing before then, and had become obsessed. Can you hear me? Yeah. So those first actions were really very successful. I think now that the society had not yet developed any antibodies to the kinds of theatrical expressions of people climbing up into the trees and chaining themselves to machines. And so it was easy to be the first item on the news night after night. But for one reason or another, the time was obviously right. An opinion poll less than 2 years later found that more than 70% of the people of New South Wales wanted an end to rainforest logging, and the government legislated with a string of national parks that stretched from the border ranges down nearly to Sydney, and that included our little Terania Creek at the, in the Nightcap National Park. And we went from there to working for the temperate rainforests in Tasmania, and were part of the Franklin River blockade to stop the flooding of the rainforests in the southwest wilderness of Tasmania, and then a couple of years later up to the Daintree for the tropical rainforests. And during those years, I'd started the Rainforest Information Centre and learned a lot about the rainforest, and had discovered indeed that the rainforests are the very womb of life, home to more than half the species of plants and animals in the world, and they were disappearing at a horrendous rate, such that less than a single human lifetime remained at those rates of destruction before they'd be utterly annihilated. And however, in spite of our, successes in Australia, it also became clear during the first half of the 80s that for every forest that was being saved, worldwide, 1,000 forests were being destroyed. And clearly there was no way to save the planet one forest at a time. That unless we could address the underlying psychological disease that allows modern humans to imagine that we can somehow profit from the destruction of our own life support systems, clearly these actions would be of no particular significance as far as the future of the world was concerned. We were watching this inexorable slide to oblivion, the sixth mass extinction of life on Earth taking place. And unless we could somehow, unless there was a radical transformation in human consciousness, clearly none of these actions were going to amount to anything. And so it was in the search for trying to understand this psychological dimension of the environmental crisis that I came upon the philosophy of deep ecology. So this term was coined by the late Arne Næss, professor of philosophy at Oslo University. And according to him, underlying all of the symptoms of the environmental crisis lay the illusion of separation between human beings and the rest of the natural world, the illusion of separation. And this might sound a little bit mystical, but in order to understand what he meant, all we have to do is hold our breath for 10 minutes while we think about it. And then we quickly realize that no separation is possible. We are inextricably embedded in the earth. We are part of the earth. We have no independent existence. And that by calling it the environment makes it sound as if it's over there somewhere, whereas the reality is that there is no separation and there can be no separation. Yet that illusion of separation is so deeply rooted in us, stretching back at least as far as the Old Testament, according to Næss, where we learn that humans are to subdue and dominate nature, and nature is to be in fear and trembling of us, that every institution of our society is corrupted by the human-centeredness, the anthropocentrism that gives rise to this illusion of separation. Næss famously said that ecological ideas won't be enough to save us. What we need is ecological identity, ecological self. When asked how we are to develop that ecological identity, he replied that what was necessary were community therapies to heal that illusion of separation. So Megan's just handed me a note. Carly needs the Zoom link. So could you take care of that, Karen? Thanks. So as I was starting to consider how these community therapies might be constructed, I had the good fortune to meet my teacher, Joanna Macy. Joanna was a professor from California who came out to Australia in the mid-80s, and her workshops then were called Despair and Empowerment. And her work in Despair and Empowerment influenced me deeply, as did my philosophy of deep ecology influence her. And so very quickly after meeting, we were walking in the rainforest at Terania Creek, in fact, and we developed the first of the re-earthing processes, the first of the experiential deep ecology processes, which both of us have been offering ever since. And this one we called the Council of All Beings. And we went on from there to develop many different processes, trying to give substance to Arnie Ness's call for community therapies to heal that illusion of separation. So I need to digress a little bit and say that a couple of years into this, I wrote to Joanna and said to her that I'd been coming up with lots and lots of different ideas for processes which I thought might be useful for nourishing our ecological identity. And to my amazement, they all seemed to work. And how could that be, that nothing seemed to fail? And her reply was that the illusion of separation is entirely coming from our side. The earth never rejected us. The earth never pushed us away. And that the moment a group of people gathers together with the shared intention to heal that illusion of separation, the work is more or less done. It hardly matters what you do after that, because it's that intention that drives the experience that we all have. And so that was a huge weight off my mind, because I'd never been, I was much more comfortable chaining myself to a bulldozer than I was to facilitating a group of people in a therapy session. The other thing I'd like to mention is that not long after that, I had the good fortune to find myself witnessing a ceremony by a group of Indigenous people in the southwest of the United States on a mesa, Hopi, Indigenous, and they were performing a ceremony. The whole community, there was just a handful of us who were witnessing it, who weren't participating. And to my shock, I saw that they were doing the Council of All Beings, which I thought that Joanna and I had invented a couple of years previously, and which they claimed they'd been doing for 10,000 years without stop. And that made me realize that the metaphor of a therapy was perhaps not the best metaphor, because therapies aren't supposed to last for 10,000 years. You're supposed to see a therapist and be healed and come out the other side, and you don't need to keep seeing the therapist any longer. Whereas, how is it that even Indigenous people living their whole lives embedded in nature find the need to regularly remember all our relations, regularly remember our interconnectedness? It seemed to me then, and as it does now, that there must be some propensity in humans, not only modern humans, to lose ourselves in merely social conceptions of ourselves, to get lost in a social identity, and that these ceremonies, which all Indigenous societies that still practice their ceremonies, all Indigenous societies have such ceremonies, that these ceremonies help to remind us of who we really are underneath that social aspect of ourselves. In 1994, I was invited to present a paper to the Eco-Psychology Symposium of the Australian Psychological Society at their 1994 conference. And I'd like to read you a little piece of that, because I looked at it earlier today and thought still fully agree with it. A century ago, Freud discovered that many of the symptoms of his patients could be traced to repressed sexual material. However, our sexuality is only the tip of the mighty repression of our very organic nature, which may be seen as the main project of the Judeo-Christian tradition. The reason why psychology is sterile and most therapy doesn't work very well is that the self that psychology describes and purports to heal doesn't exist. It is a social fiction. In reality, the human personality exists at the intersection of the ancient cycles of air and water and soil. Without these, there is no self, and any attempt to heal the personality that doesn't acknowledge this fundamental fact is doomed to failure. Only actual beings, natural beings, can be healed by life flowing through them. social fictions can't. Interestingly enough, actual things are self-healing, and to truly acknowledge our interconnectedness with the air and the water and the soil, indeed our identity with them, is to create the conditions for the spontaneous healings of the psyche to take place. It is from these, after all, that psyche itself evolved. Indeed, the deep personal realization of our billions of years of evolution in this universe, as this universe, of the fact that we belong here, this is the fundamental healing that we all long for. So that's kind of the basis for the deep ecology work. I continue to work for the conservation of nature, practical. At the moment, I'm working for the conservation of rainforests in Ecuador, and we had a victory last year where, after 4 years, we won a court case before the Constitutional Court of Ecuador, where our defence, our attempt to eject miners from our Los Cedros Biological Reserve was based upon the rights of nature clause in Ecuador's constitution. Ecuador was the first country to recognise the rights of nature, and this was the first court case that gave teeth to this. So we were able to set a precedent. So very practical kind of things on the one hand, and the empowerment from those comes from my participation in at least 10 or 12 weekends of ceremony and ritual that we call a workshop, you know, but it's synchronous with the kinds of ceremonies and rituals that all Indigenous societies throughout all of time have done in order to experience our rootedness in the living earth and to allow the inspiration and the empowerment to flow through those roots into our bodies. So the workshops today include Joanna Macy's work in Despair and Empowerment, which she now calls Honouring Our Pain for the World. And so if we get together on Friday night, we get to know each other in different ways. On Saturday morning, we do a process where we're invited to express our deepest anguish and terror and rage about what we see happening to our world. My introduction to this is to reassure people that no harm has ever come to anyone. I've done this hundreds of times, never lost anyone. You might notice that you weren't asked to sign a release form before you did this. You know, you can just relax, and it's not necessary for each person to step into the circle, because the healing comes to the entire circle merely by consenting to be present and to witness and to invite these feelings among us and to learn from the wisdom that they impart. That's where the healing comes from. And so then this usually very noisy and very passionate couple of hours ensues. And one of the reasons why these feelings are so important, apart from the catharsis and so on, is that these feelings are an important part of our intelligence. That one thing that we can say about ourselves is that every one of us is descended in an unbroken chain of ancestors stretching back 4,000 million years of life on Earth. And not one single one of those ancestors was, every single one of those ancestors was intelligent enough to reach the age of reproducing itself before it was consumed. So a tremendous record of success. And 99.9999% of that intelligence was expressed before we grew this great bulge over our nose and started thinking our way through life. So that intelligence, what we call feelings, is what remains in us of that primitive intelligence. And we can call it instinct or we can call it intuition, but whatever we call it, it was the intelligence that allowed us to survive and to succeed and to evolve through those countless aeons of time. And we suppress it now at our peril. Because however useful thinking is, and I have great respect for cognition, by itself, it's sterile. It doesn't, when we say I was moved to act, we're not talking about our thoughts, we're talking about our feelings. And so these processes that invite our feelings are really fundamentally important in order to break that awful sense of helplessness and hopelessness and what can one person do anyway, and so on and so on. And so we go from there to the experiential deep ecology processes where we nourish our ecological identity. And I invited everyone, I hope, to have some green thing in the vicinity, because most of the processes that I do are community therapies, and I don't have any experience in translating them into one-to-one individual therapeutic setting, but this one I think would transfer very easily. It's one that I'll often use on Sunday afternoon in my workshop, and it's one that needs the presence of a plant, a blade of grass, a tree, something like that. And so as a preamble to this, I'll mention that life emerged 4 billion years ago. Only 100 million years later, 3.9 billion years ago, our ancestors, single-celled bacteria living in the oceans, invent photosynthesis. Small creatures learn to capture the sun and store the energy in chemical bonds. They are able to capture 18 times as much energy from their environment than their ancestors could. This is based on a new molecule, chlorophyll, based on a ring of carbon atoms with a magnesium atom at its core. Thus, they invent a new source of food for the growing bacterial population of Earth, as they use the captured solar energy to extract carbon to build their bodies from CO2. In the process, however, they give off oxygen, a toxic poison to the anaerobic life of that time. For hundreds of millions of years, the oxygen cannot accumulate as it oxidizes iron, hydrogen, and other elements. Brought to the surface of the Earth in lava, the iron had originally entered the sea in its soluble ferrous form. The moment it came into contact with cyanobacterial oxygen, however, the seas began to rust. The iron oxidized and fell to the ocean floor as insoluble rust. Some of the banded iron formations created at this time are over 2.5 kilometers thick. Eventually, however, after more than 1 billion years of oxidation of the oceans, all available elements have been oxidized. The fallout from the rusting seas swept the water free of iron, allowing all subsequent oxygen waste released by the world's marine bacteria to leak into the atmosphere. Oxygen piles up in the atmosphere, threatening all life. So this describes, I think, the first environmental crisis that we know about, when the anaerobic bacteria, which was all the life that existed then, were threatened by oxygen. 2.7 billion years ago, oxygen-loving cells emerge. The first global environmental crisis is averted by the creativity of these tiny cellular creatures who invent a use for oxygen as they breathe it in. By replacing the magnesium atom at the core of chlorophyll with an atom of iron, the heme molecule emerges, which will one day become the hemoglobin protein that transports oxygen through the bloodstream in all animal bodies. So these two ancestors of ours, those that invented chlorophyll nearly 4 billion years ago and learned how to capture light from the sun, and those who learned how to utilize the oxygen and cycle the oxygen and breathe it in, are the ancestors of what we now call plants, everything green that you see, and animals like ourselves. And so this ancient cycle of partnership through our breath has continued throughout all of that time, that every exhalation that we make includes carbon dioxide, which is what the plants inhale, and they exhale oxygen, which is what we inhale. So there's nothing new about this. We all learned about this long ago. But when we add consciousness to that exchange, when we deliberately exchange gases with the green thing, so I'm looking out at a whole bunch of trees outside the window that I'm going to exchange gases with in this meditation that we're going to do together now, it changes everything, as you'll see. So this is a breath meditation. Many, spiritual traditions have breath meditations, but this is not about the kind of breath that is addressed in those traditions. This is the actual exchange of gases that we're talking about, the gas that leaves my body and enters the body of green plants, and the gas that leaves their bodies and enters me. And so what this meditation consists of is looking at something green, and with each exhalation, remembering that my exhalation is what you need in order to be alive, and allow oneself to feel magnanimous and generous with that breath, to know that that breath is a gift to the green world. And as we breathe in, to remember the gift that we're receiving and to feel gratitude. So we'll just take 5 minutes with this. And then I hope, Karen, that there's enough time that if one or two people have an experience that they'd like to share, that we can hear it. But in any case, if you
Absolutely.
now, we'll do this with our eyes open. And so I'm going to be looking out the window here. And as with every meditation, you'll find your mind wandering. And when you do, when you realize that your mind has wandered, just bring it back to the exchange of gifts, and notice what happens to this exchange of gases when we add consciousness to it, when each out-breath has the consciousness of generosity and each in-breath has the consciousness of gratitude. So I'll 5 minutes from now. Okay, thank you. Now, did anybody notice anything in that little exercise that they'd like to share briefly?
I'm happy to share. I sort of, it was just almost, it was just very, sorry, I'm just recently recovering from COVID, so I've got that brain fog. I think it was just lovely just to sit with my plants and just sit there and just, as you sort of said, exchanging the same air, where and just sort of sit there and delve a bit more into thinking even about how similar we are. So looking at the different patterns on the leaves and thinking about the patterns that are on my very hand. Yeah, just sort of felt that to be a very, very calming experience.
Thanks, Catherine. One more?
Thank you for that, John. For me, it suddenly felt like breathing was meaningful. There was just this moment of, well, I suppose it's bringing a consciousness and an awareness to the fact that there is this exchange, and then all of a sudden the breath felt like there was something more to it. It wasn't so, and that it was, you know, felt more, obviously more connected, but just like there was this greater power to it, and that yeah, this power that I kind of hadn't stopped to think about before, that this power in the exchange, in the reciprocity, and we can't have one without the other. So thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And thanks, Karen, for inviting me. I've never tried that exercise on Zoom before, and so it was great to try it out. Thanks.
I think it worked really beautifully, John. I agree with you, Emily. I felt more power to the breathing too. And something else, I don't know, is it humour that's tracking there? Because I was breathing with flowers in my house, 2 bunches of flowers that I'm breathing with. And it was a humour that was coming from the flowers. I'm not sure, some levity. Perhaps I need that. Thank you, John. I think it does work beautifully online. And thank you very much for your presentation. I've got a couple of things that I was beautifully challenged on around, you know, the idea of, do we call it therapy? Because therapy is a temporary thing, hopefully, and no, we want change at a more fundamental level than that. We want a whole life that changes, and I agree with you. And I'm nicely challenged there, sitting with the community therapies, and yet we want more than just a you know, the temporary nature of therapy. We want healing for our whole lives. We want to adjust things and make it a whole life thing. I'm thinking deeply about that. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. I've got Sitara on standby. Sitara's going to do a little response to you, and you started off talking with trees, and I know that's a beautiful connection with Sitara, who is a tree so full of trees. Sitara, are you there? Is that how I introduce you?
Yeah, unfortunately, my phone is, it cuts out on the video once I start speaking. But John, we wanted to give you our thanks to you for your time and your contribution today. That meditation was really lovely. And we also want to give thanks to you for your consistent work at the Rainforest Information Centre, and your leadership and your contribution to the field that we are all embarking on through ecotherapy and eco-psychology, and over the past, you know, many decades. And but really we want to thank you for showing us your unshakable big love for this planet and all its non-human beings, the green ones, the mountains, and showing us that the heart has no limits. So thank you, John.
Yeah. And if we want to just, thank you, Satara, and thank you, John. And I think we can do this, or do we do this? Or I don't know what we do on Zoom, but we're just going to really thank John from a heart place and with our hands. And thanks, Satara, for being really brave. Satara does courageous conversations and conquers her fear of public speaking. I think you can all see really, really well, and does a lot for the trees in Brisbane and globally as well. So I'm really grateful for the work that you do defending trees. Both of you do. Yeah. So those from John's network that hopped on, we're really happy to have you. We hope you enjoy, John. If you're wanting to leave us now, you can. But you're welcome, very welcome to stay on. We're not far off finished. We're just going to have a couple more student responses and a bit of a poetry reading, which you might enjoy. To offer the graduates, so we're not that far off, but yeah, thank you, thank you a lot. Satara, did you want to say anything more about specifically your ecotherapy study, or that's it for you and that's all good too, whatever?
Have
I put you on the spot? I didn't mean to. It's all good. We seem to have lost you, so that's okay. We're going to cross.
Can you hear me?
We can now. We can now.
Okay, sorry about that. I've got a poem that I wrote about ecotherapy and my little journey, or big journey. And so I'll read that if that's okay.
Beautiful, thank you.
She didn't go to the trees came to her through what seemed like at the time a series of unfortunate events. But in hindsight, it was really the universe having her back, leading her to a more authentic path. Once seen, she realized the trees were always there. They went back generations, a lineage of gardeners, a series of ancestors with green thumbs and cracked heels. And so when she discovered ecotherapy, it seemed a natural extension of this, breaking into new old ground, learning what is and what was, peeling back bark to find the heartwood, not alone, but with others sharing their unique journeys and growing so that we may lead others to trees and the ground of their being. That's it.
Beautiful, Satara, beautiful. I'm resonating very well with the cracked heels, having them just most of my life, being in the garden every day. Thank you for the gentle humour and the deep authenticity, both in that poem and the deep green heart of it. Thank you. You write beautifully. You write beautifully. Yeah, someone's put beautiful and teary, and that's from John as well. But yeah, so John, I hope you're getting some wee comments that are coming in for you as well. It's nice to get those. Wonderful. Kate, are you there? Kate Cohenan, hoping that you're there, but you could have been held up, and I haven't checked my emails to see if you are. All right, or Abby Jones. Is Abby anywhere? Brisbane. Okay. That's all right. I'm tempted to put Emily or Rachie on the spot because I know you're here, or even Catherine. I know you've both spoken. Is there a chance that you want to say anything? But it's all good. We haven't planned this. It's all good. If you don't want to say anything, just a response to either John and or. Is that a hand up, Emily? Go for it.
Yeah, I'm always happy to say something.
Cool.
I just wanted to, I guess, give my gratitude and thanks to you, Karen, for creating this space and this place for me to come, and I guess the broader group of us to come. I'm only, a mere kind of year into this little journey, and I suspect it's going to now be, well, I suspect it's actually been a lifelong, and it will continue to be, but the reflections on it. But just wanted to give my thanks for the opportunity that you give us and you prompt for reflection and making me be so very grateful that I'm not the only weirdo that talks to trees, that there's plenty of them around. Actually, I can probably point to a few on the screen, and that's all okay. That's all normal, and in fact it's such a beautiful gift to harness, and helping me learn how to harness that and strengthen that. So that's all. I just wanted to say thank you for the space, and thank you to my peers that have been on the various monthly Zooms to kind of keep that encouragement and keep that journey flowing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. It's probably one of the sanest things anyone can do is to listen to trees. They're talking some real sanity at the moment when I don't find much out and about, you know, so I think it's probably really sane, and you're in good company of tree listeners, that's for sure. Carly, I've just seen your message. You've got a poem. I'm so glad. We'd love to hear it. I'm so glad you're here with that.
Hello, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Oh, great. Yeah, my poem also features trees. I also express my gratitude to John for all his inspiration since we moved to Australia, and also the further insights I've gained of his work through doing this course. And for you, Karen, for all of your unique inspiration and different sort of the diversity of approaches that you brought to considering ecotherapy throughout this course, which has just been really, yeah, pretty mind-blowing at times. So thank you. The poem I found, I've really actually so enjoyed the incorporation of poetry into therapeutic work, which was not something I would have considered exploring. That's one aspect that I found has worked really well in the groups that I facilitated and in the individual sessions. And this poem I found is called Breathe, and it's actually by a poet from the UK. She's a teacher as well. So I've just kind of scribbled it out because I found it online. She sat at the back and they said she was shy. She led from the front and they hated her pride. They asked her advice and then questioned her guidance. They branded her loud. They were shocked by her silence. When she shared no ambition, they said it was sad. So she told them her dreams and they said she was mad. They told her they'd listen, then covered their ears and gave her a hug while they laughed at her fears. And she listened to all of them, thinking she should be the girl they told her to be best as she could. The forest and stood with the trees. She heard the wind whisper and danced with the leaves. She spoke to the willow, the elm and the pine, and she told them what she'd been told time after time. She told them she felt she was never enough. She was either too little or far, far too much, too loud or too quiet, too fierce or too weak, too wise or too foolish, too bold, too meek. Stopped and she heard what the trees said to her, and she sat there for hours not wanting to leave, for the forest said nothing. It just let her breathe. So yeah, I think that's really beautiful and meaningful in so many ways. And in terms of the work that I've started doing through this course, it captures this vision that I have of trees being sort of a safe container and creating a safe space, whether it's individually or in groups, and just sort of that unconditionality that they provide.
Beautiful, beautiful, Carly. That is a beautiful choice of poem. Who is the writer? Who is the author of that?
She's called Becky Helmsley.
Okay.
From Lancashire in the UK.
Okay. So beautiful choice of poem, Carly. Some I think I see myself somewhere in there, and maybe a little bit of you too, and maybe a bit of all of us. Thank you. And I know you've done some real pioneering work with neurodivergent children, which you've had you know, a wealth of personal experience with as well. And I was incredibly moved by some of the work that you've done and the responses of from the children, but also the parents and the carers who are deeply in this journey as well and desperately needing the breathing of the trees that just let them be. So thank you, Carly. Thank you very much. I'm so glad you popped on. Sorry about the Zoom link. Rachie, you have a poem too, which I want to do woohoo too. We'd love to hear it. We have some time.
Hey, can you hear me?
Sure.
Sure. Hi, thank you, Karen, so much for this course. I'd just like to say, it's kind of like everything we've been journeying on, and then you just take me down rabbit holes into deeper and deeper and deeper stuff. Even though you think you can go deep, nature just takes you deeper and deeper. It's endless. So, and thank you, John. Yes, I've been following you for a long time. I know Bodhi too, yeah. And I have a poem that I wrote a couple of months ago. It's called Home. So, mother of love, gentle in her ways, but not always, a rhythmic force that flows through the elements of being. Every wave beckons thee, every flame ignites a memory, every breeze calls to our beating hearts, every tree holds sacred our true nature. Come swim with her all, come dance a fiery dream, let it ignite inside all remembrance. Let it blow greatness through the eager mind. Let us stand now like a mountain, a proud warrior of love, leading our family home. Home to the light, home to her heart. It's time to come home. Great Dilly. And thank you. Yeah, I've done my certificate, but I'm still going for my diploma as well. So thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah. It is time to come home, Rachie. It is
time to come home.
My goodness, it's time to come home. The whole planet, it's time to come home to what we are.
Yeah, I always see it as the 70s woke everybody up, and now it's time to march them all home again. The Indigenous energy is coming through now. So yeah. Thank you so much, guys.
Look, thank you. Big thanks. I'm loving the poetic corner that we've turned, and we're just deep in the poetry realm now. Eco-poetics, it's a beautiful thing. I think our relationship with nature, sometimes the words start to fail, and so we have to break into either songs or poems or dances or ecstatic kind of I don't know what, something to express the beyond words of it, really, and how deep, that's how deep it is. And John was talking about the atoms that, oh John, I love hearing that stuff, but I can never fully comprehend, and I love that I can't in some ways too. The atoms that did the breathing or started the photosynthesis or something, millions, and it's mind-blowingly, incomprehensibly unlimited, isn't it? I think they call it the Magnum Mysterium, the great mystery of life, really, which ignites us all. And I know each of the students that where it's lit you up, I know life lights you up. So I'm just, if there was no one else with anything, and I don't want to miss anyone, and I don't know who just jumped on or just looking, I just want to acknowledge those who have completed the work. First of all, I'm going to go with the diploma. We've got Carly here tonight. Moran is an apology from Lutruwita, Tassie. But can I just show you the bird, the beautiful, where is it? There we go. The beautiful Piwakawaka in Aotearoa, or fantail in Australia, very, very closely related bird. This is gorgeous artwork from the partner of one of the students, and beautiful, beautiful framed artwork on your diploma here. And I'm just going to acknowledge you, Carly, for 500 hours of work, including a placement that you did yourself, and you forged yourself, and you made inroads into the caring community with neurodivergence. Beautiful work that you did, so heartfelt and really thorough. So this is coming in the mail to you. and also Moran, who isn't here, but I just want to acknowledge both of you. And if we can sort of do the clappy thing and the well done. 500 hours is a big achievement for this stage of the ecotherapy adventure, we're calling it. And then I'm going to show you the bird on the certificate. There's this gorgeous eastern spinebill. Some of you know I see this bird, and we've got the fern leaf for both Australia and Aotearoa. But this bird acts like a hummingbird often. Has anyone seen it do the hummingbird thing with its beak deep in the throat of the honey for the honey? This bird knows where to go for the sweet stuff, I tell you. So there's a beautiful eastern spinebill on the certificate. And the certificate is Emily, Rachie, Zatara, Abby, Kate, and Maxine. Now, a couple of those aren't here, but big yay and big claps to those who are here. Yeah, lots of encouragement. And I'm going to shout out to Catherine too. I know that if you didn't get COVID, you would have got through on your certificate. So you're basically there, girl. And just want to encourage you, you'll be over that line really soon. And then, you know, find a whole new world in front of you. So, and acknowledge the beautiful work you do with your plant music. And I know you love your plants. It's hard work. 200 hours is the certificate with a small group that they facilitate for close friends or colleagues, and lots of learning going on, but also the unlearning, the decolonizing of your learning that you've done. And just a shout out to all the other students who are at various stages of sort of working towards both of these. Keep going, keep going. It's beautiful work. It's beautiful journeying, even when it's hard, even when the unlearning feels really, really ungrounded. For a while, you've got the carpet pulled out from you. It's growth. It's what growth feels like. I just want to encourage the growth. Nature grows. That's what she does. That's how all she knows in her cycles of decay and new beginnings and growth. And that's what you've done. And I'm so proud of you all and thrilled that there's some container and some supporting you on this journey. I'm really, really thrilled about that. Certificates are in the mail and diplomas in the mail. So really, I now have a poem that I would love to read. If there's nothing else, nobody else has jumped on with anything else to say or do? All good. This is a poem it's called Emergence, and it's by Joy Harjo. Some of you may know Joy Harjo. She is the Poet Laureate in the US at the moment, which is a huge honour for Joy. She's a Muskogee woman of the Cree Nation from Oklahoma. She is an incredible poet with deep wisdom and elder. I want to bow to the eldership of her poetry. I'm very moved when I talk about Joy. She has a life of intense trauma and intense grief and collective grief upon grief, including a grandmother on the Trail of Tears from Tennessee, I think, driven over to Oklahoma. She still has the iron pot of her great-great-grandmother on that Trail of Tears that the government allocated to them as they walked and were driven from their homes. Joy has amazing healing in her poetry. This poem is called Emergence, and it is to both you as emerging ecotherapists, emerging this work, into the world. It's also a poem for the world that is emerging as well as you are. So we're all kind of co-emerging and doing this emerging thing, and I'm very moved when I read it. There is no world like this one emerging. It's midsummer night, the light is skinny. A thin skirt of desire skims the earth. Dogs bark at the musk of other dogs and the urge to go wild. I am lingering at the edge of a broken heart, striking relentlessly against the flint of hard will. It's coming apart, and everyone knows it. So does squash erupting in flowers, the colour of the sun. So does the momentum of grace gathering allies in the partying mob. The heart knows everything. I remember when there was no urge to cut the land or each other into pieces, when we knew how to think in beautiful. There is no world like the one surfacing. I can smell it as I pace in my square room. The neighbour's television entering my house by waves of sound makes me think about buying a new car, another kind of cigarette, when I don't need another car and I don't smoke cigarettes. A human mind is small when thinking of small things. It is large when embracing the maker of walking, thinking, flying. If I can locate the sense beyond desire, I will not eat or drink until I stagger into the earth with grief. I will locate the point of dawning and awaken with the longest day in the world. So that is both a prayer and a blessing to you as you go forth, emerging this work of ecotherapy, the healing work of nature, with all of its challenges and all of its resistances and all of its denial. I am proud that you will go forth and you are emerging into a world that is also emerging. We welcome Satara's non-human being of cat into the circle tonight as well. And anyone else's cat that might be stalking past, or dog. All right, folks. Well, look, that's pretty much our graduation. My heart is full of it's not proud. It's something much deeper than proudness. It's I'm just so heartened that there are human beings out there that love this earth so much, that are moved to step out of comfort zones and into transcendence, emergence, growth, in all the pain of that growth, as well as all of the joy of that growth. I'm going to acknowledge it all. And I'm so heartened to live in a world of people that care enough to be focusing into this ecotherapy adventure at the moment. I can live in a world with you all in it, knowing that you'll do what you'll do, and we'll do it together, because it's too big for all of us. I don't know, John, I'm glad we've still got you, but do you want to just have a last comment on the fact that it's too big for all of us, and how we need each other I know I've put you on the spot there. Do you feel like responding there?
Oh, only to, echo the congratulations and the gratitude that I feel for the work that all of you are embarking on, and what a gift to the world that you are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. You really are a gift to the world, in all of what's brewing in you and what is emerging and seeding and flowering and blossoming and fruiting. So thank you everyone. Go forth and have a beautiful Friday night. It's a bit later in Aotearoa. Have a good sleep. Tui, Sabine, if you're still with us. Wonderful to have you all here. Thank you so much to you, John. Thank you. Yeah. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye all. Thank you. Have a happy and safe New Year period.
Yes.
Congrats everyone. Big congrats. I hope you've got some bubbly. I hope you've got something to pop, or something to celebrate, some way of celebrating. I hope you've got someone there to pat you on the back and say, well done.
Go see what the trees have to say.
Okay, Emily, go for it. Get out there and listen. And if no one else is there, pat yourself on the back.
Yeah.
The self that doesn't exist, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Good night. Good